Good morning and welcome to the Hold Up to Hallelujah podcast. I'm your host, Jesse. I hope this episode brings healing and the encouragement that you need today. But most importantly, I pray that it brings you closer to Jesus. Let's get started.
Good morning, everybody. We are super excited to be on today and recording. I have been so excited about this for so long, but I have on here with us my mother-in-law, which sounds very odd to say. It sounds bad to say in-law, but she is phenomenal. She is like another mama to me, and so I'm so thankful that she's here today and that we were able to talk about her testimony and just talk about God and what God is doing in our lives. So I'm super excited. So before we jump into it, let's go ahead and open with prayer. Father, we thank you for this opportunity that you have given us to be able to come together and to be able to share what you've done in our lives, Lord. Father, I just ask that you allow this to just to be a wonderful presentation of your love in our life, Lord, and that the words that we speak are words that are directly from you, Lord. Father, I thank you for the opportunity to be here together, and I just ask that this shares encouragement with everyone who's listening. Father, thank you for everything you have done and you continue to do in our life. In your son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
So we kind of wanted to start each one of these podcasts off with a small devotional. And so Jersey and I went to Louisiana last September. And when we did, we heard a teaching on the woman at the well. And since then, I've kind of been fixated on this story of the woman at the well. And so we're going to read that story. I'm terrible at pronunciation and reading and all of those things, but God is using that for good. So we're going to read John 4, or part of John 4 anyway. Therefore, when the Lord knew that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, though Jesus himself did not baptize, but his disciples, he left Judea and departed again to Galilee. But he needed to go through Samaria. I love that because it says he needed to go through Samaria. He didn't have to, but he needed to. It wasn't that he was trying to skip over it or go around it like so many other people, but he wasn't afraid of the mess and he wasn't afraid of the hard stuff. So he came to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Now Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied from his journey, sat thus by the well. It was about the 6th hour. A woman of Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink," for his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. I love this because a lot of people say that shows his humanity. But what I love to think about is, like, I have a hard time believing that the disciples were not as weary as Jesus was, and that Jesus was more wearied than anybody else. Like, that he's literally the Son of God, fully man, fully God, and was tired than the rest. But that's what he showed to them, was that he was tired. So he was showing his humanity, but it was like he was almost protecting the woman at the well, because he didn't say, like, well, I'm going to go talk to her and you guys probably wouldn't, approve or at that time Samaria and Jews had a lot of friction. So, he wasn't like setting the stage to tell all of her business to everybody, but he was kind of protecting her. Then the woman of Samaria said to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." Jesus answered and said to her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." Then the woman said to him, "Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where then do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as well as his sons and his livestock?" I think when it says that right there, it makes me think of, like, we all kind of have like a Jacob's well in our life, like something we go back to over and over and over and expecting it to fill us, but it just doesn't fill us. Like, we keep going back, whether it's drugs, whether it's alcohol, whether it's some kind of addiction, whether it's something even that we don't see as a sin, but that it is because it's taken over our life. Maybe you're watching too much, you're binge watching too many Criminal Minds, or you've got too much, you're too focused on basketball or something like that, and we keep going back to it, and it's like we think we need it because we're so comfortable with it, but we're focusing on the wrong things. Jesus answered and said to her, "Whoever drinks of this water will thirst again, but whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst. But the water I shall give him will become in him a fountain of water springing up into everlasting life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water, that I may not thirst, nor come here to draw." Jesus said to her, "Go call your husband and come here." The woman answered and said, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You have well said, 'I have no husband,' for you have had 5 husbands, and the one whom you now have is not your husband, and that you truly spoke." Then the woman said to him, "Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, and you Jews say that in Jerusalem is the place where one ought to worship." I love that because he tells her, "Go get your husband," and she's like, "Oh, no, I don't have a husband. Like, let's not talk about me. Like, no, that's not gonna work." And he calls her out, and he tells her, he doesn't do that out of a hateful place, but he does it out of love, like to bring her past that. And then then she tries to change the subject. She's like, "You know what? I think you might be a prophet. Let's move on. Like, let's change the subject." Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. But the hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth." The woman said to him, "I know that Messiah is coming, who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things." And it's almost like she's saying, you know what? Like, I don't get all of this, but one day the Messiah is going to come, and it's going to all make sense. One day, Jesus is going to explain it all to me. And Jesus said to her, "I who speak to you am he." And I don't know about you, but that makes me pretty excited.
Mm-hmm.
And like that he chose to like reveal himself to a Samaritan woman. Like he didn't go into a synagogue and tell all the teachers and all the rabbis and all of those things who he was. Like he's talking on a real level right now with a real person who's going through real things. And they're not perfect things, they're messy things. Like she's going through all kinds of things. And so nothing in her actual reality changed. Like nothing in her actual, she was still a woman, she was still she was still a Samaritan, she still had to get water every single day, like she still had to keep going back physically to get the water, but nothing in her reality changed. And if we skip down a little bit, it says, "The woman then left her water pot, went her way into the city, and said to the men, 'Come see a man who told me all the things I ever did. Could this be the Christ?' Then they went out of the city and came to him." So there's like a revival that almost, we keep reading, we learn kind of about this revival that takes place in this city, all because she went out and told her story. And that's kind of like when I felt like God was like leading me to do this podcast. That's kind of like what I kept going back to, was like our testimonies and how many people have testimonies and they just need a platform to be able to tell it. And we had kind of spoke like before we got on to actually record about how you felt like God was like telling you to tell your story. And then I was like, hey, can we record this podcast where you tell your story? So I think it's amazing just how God has like paved and like weaved all of these things into this perfect story that's been your life and been our life that's been together. And so I wanted to ask you, like, if you could maybe share a little bit of your testimony with us.
Well, I don't know where to begin.
What about like the part of your life where maybe you felt like things started to get hard?
Okay. That would be probably at 16 years old. I was born and raised in church, and so when I turned 16, to get away from home, I got married and moved away. And my wild side came out, and I wanted to experience all these sinful things that I had grew up hearing was a sin, I mean, I had a perfect childhood, perfect parents, everything. But I wanted to experience all these things. And so that led to getting mixed up with the wrong men. Mm-hmm. That led to, that I wouldn't change for anything, but having 2 boys, kind of back to back, without a father, mm-hmm. that were totally dependent on me. So I did go to school and became a nurse. And then, I struggled as a single mom with working, trying to take care of everything, trying to do everything. And I still had this little itch, this little wildness in me that I still wanted to, I was young, mm-hmm. I wanted to do things. And, then I met the father of my daughter. And it's like I went from, as far as men, from bad to worse, you know. Because I had quit going to church, of course, when I left home, and just, you know, forgot about God. And if it wasn't for all those years that I was out there, if it wasn't for my family's prayers keeping me and covering me, I know I wouldn't be here. And when I got with my daughter's father, like I said, I went from bad to worse. And I was really, I was kind of sheltered growing up. So I never had any experiences with drinking or drugs or anything.
Right.
And so my daughter's father was on drugs. And I was too naive to even know. And I finally just started like questioning things and putting things together, but I still didn't understand. I didn't understand why spoons disappeared in my house. You know?
Right.
Just so many things I didn't understand and I was really naive about. And so when I did get it figured out and kind of tried to lay down an ultimatum to him, he got me, you know, into it and trying it. And my stupid gullibility and naivety with all of it, my thought was, it won't get me. Drugs won't get me like that. So I tried them with him. And that led me on about a 5-year downhill, rock bottom ordeal, you know. Lots of bad times. I lost my job as a nurse. I lost my kids at one point. And it took me losing everything over and over because, you know, I would do the drugs with him, and then we would try to clean up. He'd get clean. And not to take any responsibility off myself, but, you know, if he was clean and not bringing it in, I wasn't doing it. You know what I'm saying? But, but every time we'd get straightened out a little bit, you know, he was really, if he would have put half the effort into doing good things, we'd have had it made. Rather than the bad things. So whenever he would get back into drugs, it was just a constant cycle, a vicious cycle. We would lose everything, have nothing, have to start over. You know, it came down to, you know, you start doing things that you would never or have never done, like stealing. I mean, you'll do what you got to do.
Right.
And, but it took getting in trouble legally with bad checks. Because like I said, you'll do what you got to do to get it, you know. And it took losing my kids for a little while. And it took me going to a 6-month rehab to start trying to get my life together. And then towards the end of rehab, he got out of prison. He stayed in and out of prison. Towards the end of rehab, he got out of prison. He went into like a group home, fellowship home, you know, and I was finishing up my 6-month rehab. And I thought everything was going to be okay now. He's going to have this great life, you know. But that wasn't to be, because it wasn't long before he started again. And we went downhill again. And, it came to the point where I knew I wasn't going to get my boys back. I was going to lose my daughter. I was going to end up dead, or I was going to end up in prison if I didn't leave him. So I did. And it was one of the hardest things I've ever done, because for some reason, somehow, I thought or felt like I loved him, I felt like he could be different and all that stuff. But my brain knew the right thing to do. I just had to leave, walk away, start over on my own. And, shortly after, got my sons back, had my daughter. She was 2. And, just had to get him out of my life. And I still, though, part of me still loved him and wanted things to work out. But like I said, my head knew, but my heart didn't, kind of thing. Mm. And so I moved back home near my family, started over and started trying to pick up the pieces. I had my daughter and I got my boys back, and I worked. I couldn't be a nurse anymore at that time, because my license got put on like probation. Mm. And I had to go do something I never would have dreamed I would. I had no clue what I was doing. I just knew I needed to get a job and be able to support myself and my kids. Mm. And so when I moved, after I left her father, moved back here, started picking up the pieces and all, I stayed with my brother for about 3 months. I found a job within the first 2 weeks. And I didn't even have a clue where to go to look for a job. And I know God was in control of my situation even then, because I just went out looking for a job and I had no clue where to go. Like, what am I going to do, Right. Where am I going to go? Where am I going to make enough money to support my kids? And, And I ended up sitting in a Bob Evans parking lot. And I thought to myself while I was sitting in the car, like, what am I doing here? Like, I've never worked in food or in any capacity or anything like that, And I remember sitting there after I turned the car off, and that was the first place I went. I went straight there. And I was like, what am I doing here? What am I, I went in and applied for a job, got a job, and learned how to be a waitress. And I ended up being a pretty good waitress.
I think you're phenomenal.
I did it for 8 years as a single mom, mm-hmm. and raised my kids with no assistance, and took care of my kids, paid my bills, took care of everything. And that's where I met my current husband. Mm-hmm. He was a customer. Of course, I was single for a long time in between my daughter's father and all that, up until I met my current husband.
Right.
But, God's hand was in it all along. From me pulling in that Bob Evans restaurant parking lot, wondering what in the world was I doing, to me 8-10 years later meeting my current husband there. Mm. God had a plan. He knew where I was supposed to be.
Yeah, he did.
I have so many like fond memories of you working at Bob Evans too. Like with me and Tyler going in there, with me and somebody else going in there,
yeah.
And you telling them, like, I will never forget that, you looking at this other guy that I was with and telling him that I was going to be your daughter-in-law one day.
I knew from the time that you and Tyler, my son, started dating that you were the one for him. Moms just know this stuff. I don't know. And then when y'all broke up for a minute and you dated that other guy and brought him in there, I just looked at him and told him that you was going to be my daughter-in-law. So, you know.
It was embarrassing at the moment, I'm sure, but I really, I still laugh about that. It was so funny. And I don't know why, of all the places for us to go eat, why we went to Bob Evans.
For me to tell y'all that.
Maybe so. I remember one time when we were sitting, when we had broken up for that period, you had brought Megan and y'all came into Grant's where we were working, and Megan was like, I miss you. When are you coming over? Why don't you come over? And you just left me. You left her on the aisle with me, and I was like, I didn't have any answers for her. And she was asking all these very hard questions. Oh my gosh. And then us going to Bob Evans and ordering burgers with cheese.
Oh my gosh. This girl here, she would come in and order a burger with cheese. I said, do you mean a cheeseburger? She's like, no, a burger with cheese. I'm like, that's a cheeseburger.
We were convinced they were cheaper that way. Convinced.
I just didn't get it.
Oh man.
Like,
so many good times.
Yeah.
So you were talking about how God had his hand on you from the time that you pulled into Bob Evans parking lot and started working there to when you met Joe. And
well, he always had his hand on me. Even when I was out there in my drug addicted times, even when I was with the bad men, you know. But anyway, like I said, God always through everything had his hand upon me, and it was, you know, family's prayers and being covered, and, you know, even as far out there as I was and I got, he was there. And it was even, I gave my testimony once before, and someone spoke in tongues, and then it was interpreted. And I remember her saying that the Lord said he had kept me from danger so many times, and in so many times that I wasn't even aware I was in danger. You know, and I thank him every day for that protection, because there's so many times that, you know, things were going on and situations, and I really shouldn't be here, you know, just in those times, not to mention later in life things that happened, and, you know.
That's incredible. So when you were kind of hitting on it just a second ago, but you were talking about later in life when stuff was happening. What can you tell us a little bit about what happened in November of 2015?
It's 2014.
I think it was 2015.
2015.
We were married.
Okay. Yeah. You're right. Well, I have a short-term memory problem from it, obviously. At that time, I had been married a little less than a year to my husband. And I had felt sick that whole year. Didn't know why. I just felt bad. And I was getting ready to turn 40. And I thought, my God, is this what 40 feels like? You know, because I'm not going to make it. Because I had a bad year, you know. And I was back working as a nurse. I'd got my license reinstated and all that. You know, life was good. Life was great. The kids were great. Everything's good. I had gotten through the rough chapters in the 20s, you know. And I was getting ready to... I don't remember all of this, but my husband tells me. I've heard the story so many times. But I was getting ready to go in for a 3-day weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So I went down on Thursday evening. I went downstairs to fix dinner. And my husband said he heard something hit the floor. He said it sounded like the microwave slid off the counter and hit the floor. And he yelled, "Are you okay?" And obviously I didn't answer. I'd had a sudden cardiac arrest. Went straight back in my kitchen floor. You know, he said my eyes were dilated and fixed. He said my tongue had rolled over. I'd lost control of my bladder. I had no pulse. you know. So he yelled at my daughter, who was 11 at the time, to call 911. And he did CPR until the ambulance finally got there. Then he said the ambulance had to shock me 3 times to get a rhythm and get a heartbeat back. And they took me straight to the hospital, about 10 to 15 minutes away. And the local hospital didn't know what to do with me or what was wrong with me. They did find out that I had mono, and I was in the peak of mono, which explains why I felt bad all year, you know.
Right.
And with less than an hour after getting to the local hospital, though, and then doing what little bit, you know, they flew me out to Charleston to a bigger town and bigger hospital. Well, Charleston didn't know what to do with me either. I was on a ventilator. I was tied down in 4-point restraints because apparently I was not a good patient.
You were a terrible patient.
And kept trying to extubate myself, and I didn't know what was going on. But I don't remember any of it. And then from Charleston, they had me less than 24 hours. They flew me to Cleveland Clinic. And I woke up in ICU. And then they took me off the vent. And I don't know, like, the timeline, because I don't remember much of anything, really. I know they had the best blue yogurt ever at that hospital, but anyway.
You and this yogurt. She's convinced, side note, she's convinced that it was blue yogurt. And really, I think it was pink yogurt, and it had, like, a blue spoon that was, like, color activated. She was so convinced that it was blue yogurt.
And I still go to Cleveland Clinic once or twice a year for my checkups and all those things. And I look for that blue yogurt every time. But anyway, so, but anyway, my family was told by doctors that I wasn't going to make it. They were told if I did that I would probably need a heart transplant. I had a viral cardiomyopathy, which they think, you know, the mono set it off or caused it, whatever. Because, I mean, there was nothing else. It wasn't a heart attack.
Right.
It wasn't anything related to anything that I had done. I was just in the peak of mono, and it infected my heart. So I had a sudden cardiac arrest due to a viral cardiomyopathy. And yeah, my husband ended up, you know, he did CPR for quite a while. And if you don't do CPR, if you're not breaking a few ribs, you're not doing it right. And he didn't hold back. So it was a pretty rough recovery. I had a heart pump put in, and then they later took it out because my heart wasn't working at all. And then it had started to pick up, and they took the heart pump out. And I was up there, I think, about 2 weeks in Cleveland. And before I left, they put an internal defibrillator in me, which I have been shocked twice. That is no fun. So I still have, you know, I didn't even realize at the time when I first woke up in Cleveland after that happened to me, my first thought was, oh my gosh, does work know where I am? I'm supposed to be at work. And then my second thing they said I said was, you know, the back of my head hurt from falling in the kitchen floor 2 or 3 weeks before when it happened. And I felt the back of my head, and my hair was a knotted mess. And I was so mad because nobody had brushed my hair. So,
That's
anyway.
no exaggeration either. Like, she was mad. And then I remember brushing one side of your hair, and Nana was brushing the other side. And you were like, Jesse, if you start at the bottom, it won't hurt. And I was like, I am at the bottom, and I'm holding your hair. There's no way that it is hurting. Nana was like, I'm going to hit you with this brush in a minute.
I don't remember. This is just all stuff that everybody's told me over and over the years. But anyway, I didn't even realize, like after it happened and I, came to, got off the ventilator, was awake and all that, I didn't even realize all the side effects and how my life had changed from that point on. But I know that God saved me for a reason, because they didn't expect me to live. And they thought, I would need a transplant if I did. They thought I'd be in a vegetative state. They still call me the miracle patient at Cleveland. Because to look at me or to talk to me, you would think I'm pretty normal, But I have short-term memory problems, and I have lots of physical side effects as a result of what happened. Mm-hmm. So I tried to go back to work after about 3 months against the doctor's wishes. But I was like, I couldn't imagine not working,
Right.
And like I said, I didn't realize how my life... You don't realize at first when something drastic like that happens to you, how it's going to change your life. Mm-hmm. And you don't see the side effects from things until later.
Right.
And so I went back to work after 3 months, and it went from... I worked about a year, and it went from bad to worse. I mean, I just couldn't do it anymore. Physically, mentally, memory-wise, I was in tears every day. It was awful. And I finally had to resign because I feared for my patient's safety. I didn't, it just wasn't worth it.
Right.
So, anyway, I quit working, and then it took me years fighting to get disability, which I finally did. But during all that time, with my lost income and fighting for disability, and us living on half of what we were used to living on, mm-hmm. we never done without anything. We never lost anything. Never had anything cut off. God took care of us the whole time.
Ain't he good?
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. And I think about it, that might seem like a little thing in the whole scheme of things, but that's a big deal,
Mm-hmm. Well, especially too, because you still had Megan living at home. I mean, she was still little.
Yeah. I still had a daughter at home.
Mm-hmm. It's incredible. Yeah. When I think about, that was such an impactful time, I think, in our life too, like on the other side of it, because we had just moved to Glenville for not very long. And we had been in Glenville, I don't know, maybe a couple of months. And we were laying in bed. We had just laid down, like to lay in bed for the evening. And Megan and Jacob called at the same time. And a day, like earlier that day, I called Tyler on his way to work. And I was like, hey, are you okay? And he was like, yeah, I'm fine. What do you mean? I was like, I don't know. I just have a really bad feeling. And I feel like it's you. And he was like, no, I'm fine, but you're making me nervous. I'm about to go work in a jail. Like, you're making me nervous. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but just be careful. And then later that night is when they called us at the same exact time. And I looked at him and I was like, it's your mom. And so we called back Jacob first because we thought, he might have more information about whatever was wrong. Called Jacob, and Jacob was like, Mom fell down the stairs. And we're going to the hospital.
There were no stairs involved.
Yeah. And so we called Megan, and then Sarah got on the phone and kind of told us what was going on. So we left everything. We didn't think about it at all. We just left. We should have got a bath. There were so many things we probably should have done, but we just jumped in the car and headed to Princeton. So we were 2.5 hours away, and we kept, like, the closer we were getting, people kept calling and saying, like, how far are you? How far are you? Because I think they were worried, like, that Tyler wasn't going to be able to say goodbye. And then they were going to fly you to Charleston. And so we were trying to get there before they flew you out. And so when we finally got there, I remember Robbie parked the car. We just ran in, and it felt like there were nurses everywhere, like just showing us exactly where to go. And Tyler went in, and we both went in. And Tyler just looked at you and walked away. And I was so scared that was going to be like the last time that we seen you. Like I was, like it just did, like nothing felt good. Like nothing felt like it was going to be okay. And so we left there and we drove to Charleston, and me, Tyler, and Jacob all rode together. And we went up there, and I'll never forget this. This was like something funny in the middle of like tragedy. But it was like so many bonds were made and formed that, like, I wish that hadn't happened to you. But like I'm so grateful that we were all there together during that time. Because I remember we were at McDonald's, and this is such like a small version of it. But Jacob was like, we were like, what do you want to eat? Jacob was like, nothing much. Maybe just a cheeseburger and some fries. Nothing much though. Maybe a tea. Like it was just funny the way he kept going about it. And we just had such a strong bond was formed. I mean, I'd known Jacob for like a long time by then. And it was just like so much other stuff was like formed, and like just to see the family like be able to come together.
Well, stuff like that brings you together.
Yeah,
you know?
And it really was. I mean, it was incredible. And I remember Joe bought us that hotel room, and so we all slept in the hotel room.
It was your anniversary, wasn't it?
When we got to Cleveland, it was. He bought us a hotel room up there too. But when we were in Charleston, he bought us a hotel room because it was like the middle of the night and nobody had slept, so we had taken turns like sleeping and going to see you. And I remember Megan being, you know, I think you said she was 11 a little bit ago, but she asked Tyler. I heard her ask him, and she said, "Is Mom gonna die?" And he just ignored her. I don't think he answered her at all, and because he just didn't know what to say. We were kids. I mean, we were
Right.
adults, but just barely. And so she came in and she asked me, and I just remembered in that moment. We were sitting in a Bible study a couple years before that. Maybe not even a couple years before that. My timeline's all off. Maybe even just a couple months before that, really, because we were in a Bible study in Glenville. So probably a couple months before that. And this lady had her husband, I'm not exactly sure what was wrong with him, but he had struggled with some kind of disease. And she had been somewhere where someone had told her, you know, when your kids ask if your husband's going to die, don't ever tell them that he's not going to die. Because there will come a point that he does pass. You know, it may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but it will happen. And so, you got to find a better way to answer. And I remember her asking that question, and I pulled back from that Bible study, and I was thinking, like, God was depositing things into us when we didn't even know we were going to need it.
Right.
You know, because, like, what she spoke in that moment, in that Bible study, that someone else spoke to her, like, still the ripple effect of that was, you know, a little bit later.
Right.
And like I was talking to Megan about very real things that we didn't have the answers to, you know, and it didn't look good. And I'll never forget, like, just that conversation with her, and like how God prepared me for that when I didn't even know that I needed it. And that's kind of like what you said earlier, you know, like God was taking care of you even when you didn't know you needed it, or protecting you from things that you didn't even see.
Right.
You know, and that's so incredible how he does that. Yeah, it was our anniversary in Cleveland, and Joe took care of us. He got us a hotel room for the night. We had a really, like, it was, to be in the situations that we were all in, everybody just made the best of everything. Like, I can remember sitting in Charleston, and everybody just telling jokes and trying to, like, bring some kind of smile to everybody. And then in Cleveland, even in Charleston, whenever you would wake up, it was like you were trying to pull everything out. And then when you did, I remember one night you were like, Jesse, I don't recognize those people. And I like looked around the room, and there wasn't anybody in there. And I was like, there's nobody here. And I was like, this is not good. Like, she's going home. Like, this is not good. And just like seeing that whole process, and like how bad it looked and how grim it looked, and like then looking at you today and like seeing how good you're doing, and like, you know, you're a phenomenal grandma and you're doing amazing things. And just to see like what God has done in your life, like, really speaks so much. And to have had the memories with you that we had throughout that whole thing was really phenomenal. And the confidence that you have about the stuff you remember and the stuff that we're trying to tell you, like that yogurt.
I'm telling you, it was blue. It was so good.
Gosh. And I think you had a nurse like one time, and he was like Edgar or something, and you kept calling him Olaf. And you were like, Olaf, he's been real good to me. And we were like, is there a snowman around? Like, what are you talking about?
It's hard to tell.
It's just incredible to see like what God has done in your life and like this legacy that you have, you know, with the 3 kids that you have, and you know, Tyler for one. I mean, I speak about him because that's my husband, but you know, he's phenomenal. Like, you could not ask for a better husband. You could not ask for a better dad. If you need something, like, he is right there. I mean, I can't tell you how many things that he don't care to do, and he does for the three of us girls, and then also Emmett. But you know, I can so many times, like, he's laid down and let them put makeup on him and all kinds of stuff, just because, you know, he wants that relationship and he wants to be, you know, everything. So the legacy that you have instilled and like the work ethic that you've instilled in him and in your family really is incredible.
I've been so blessed to have 3 wonderful kids that have all, I'm so proud of them. They've done so good with their lives. They're still doing good. You know, and I'm so blessed and so thankful for that.
They really are incredible. So earlier we were kind of talking about this, but in this story of the woman at the well, when she has this true encounter with Jesus, like, nothing in her life has changed. She still has all of the same problems, all of the same things going on. She's still got the mess of husbands and the mess of all of that. And nothing has changed for her. But she locks eyes with the Messiah one day, and everything changed for her. And so I just wonder, like, if you could talk for a minute, like, what did that encounter look like for you when everything started to kind of, like, look up? Was it one moment? Was it, like, just a time in your life? Like, what would that look like?
Well, it was both. It was kind of like a little bit of a slow journey at first. You know, it was after I had left Megan's father, moved back home, and I was broken. I was so broken. Just everything I had been through, everything that had happened, leaving him, losing my kids for that time, you know. And so here I moved back home, and my parents, I say they nagged me, but I know it wasn't nagging. They just constantly asked me to come to church on Sunday mornings with them, you know. And I grew up with that, you know. But I was at a point where I was willing to try anything, you know, to make my life better, to fill that hole in me, to fill that void. Because I believe without Jesus, you have a void, you have a hole in you, you know, that nothing else can fill.
That's good.
And so I started going to church with Mom and Dad on Sunday mornings, and I didn't want to, and I didn't want to hear it. But the preacher I heard it I could not hear it. And it started getting through to me, you know. Growing up, preachers preached on hell and how you had to be perfect and everything was a sin. And, you know, this pastor was preaching about the love of God and how you can't be too far gone. And because I thought I was, you know, I didn't know if Jesus would take me back or you know. And so anyway, it started getting through to me. I was hearing it, I was feeling it, and you know, but there was still a tiny part of me that still thought I loved Megan's father. I still hadn't completely surrendered. And I remember one morning on my way to work, I always opened at work, so there wasn't nobody on the road, you know, but I literally just threw up my hands off the steering wheel and said, "Okay, God, I surrender. I give up. It's all you." You know. And from that moment on, and he took care of everything. Even when I didn't know. You know.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Man, he's so good. That is awesome. I am so excited that the story that you're telling here today, and that you've told before, but that you're getting out today, and who knows might hear it, but I just know that there's going to be somebody that hears it that can relate to it, and that it's going to be so beneficial. Because I think sometimes it's hard for us to get our stories out, or for us to open up and talk about all the stuff that's kind of happened in our life. But I think it's so important that we do, because, you know, we have a testimony for a reason. You know, the stuff that we're going through, like, you know, we want people to see Jesus through it. You know, the stuff that we've been through, and that what He's brought us out of.
And I want people to know, you know, it's never too late.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
It's good.
And He can bring you out of anything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, He brought me out of drug addiction, some criminal activity,
Mm-hmm.
A whole bunch of stuff that goes along with that kind of life, you know.
Right.
And then He brought me from the brink of death with my heart. You know, I mean, it's never too late, and He can bring you out of anything.
Mm-hmm.
And He can turn it all around.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. If you could give one piece of advice to, like, the younger generation, or like somebody who might be in a situation similar to stuff that you've went through, what would it be? Not to put you on the spot or anything.
We didn't rehearse this.
Sorry about that.
I would just say, ask me again.
If you could give one piece of advice to the younger generation, or to somebody who's struggling with stuff that you've been through, what would it be?
Just give God a chance.
That's good.
I mean, I tell my brother that all the time. You know, just give it a chance. You ain't got nothing to lose.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
I mean, and you'll see the blessings and the benefits. Not that you won't have hard times.
Mm.
You know, life isn't perfect for Christians, or,
Right.
you know, but you'll see how your life will change.
Mm-hmm.
And the peace of having Him with you through everything,
Mm-hmm.
you know, makes a world of difference. Just give it a chance, you know.
Mm-hmm. That's so good. So good. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I'm
You're
super
welcome.
excited for this to go out and to be in the hands of so many people. But, you know, when it comes to in-laws, I truly got the best. I really do believe that.
Aw.
There's not a single person in the family that I'm like, oh, they're my in-laws. Like, I love every single person. And I feel like they're just like my family.
I was blessed with a wonderful daughter-in-law. 2 wonderful daughter-in-laws.
Yeah.
And an almost son-in-law.
That's good. That's good.
Waiting on that one.
That's good. Yeah, we have definitely been blessed in our family. But I'm so thankful for you for coming today, and I hope that you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.